Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into karma yoga today. But before you think this is all about, some cosmic reward system or something, I want to assure you it's different. We're going deeper than just what goes around comes around, you
No,
know.
absolutely. Today we're exploring karma yoga as a practice, a way of living, and we're using the work of Swami Vivekananda as our guide.
And get this, our source material is his book, also called Karma Yoga.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, it's based on lectures,
Mhm.
actual lectures that he gave in New York City back in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about bridging ancient wisdom with modern life. Right?
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating.
It really is. Seeing these timeless ideas discussed in that context definitely adds another layer to it for sure.
Okay, so let's jump right in. First things first. How does Swami Vivekananda define karma? Like what's his take on it?
He says it's not just about the actions themselves, but it's more about the effects those actions have on us, on our character, both physically and mentally. It's like this ripple effect of everything we do.
So it's like, okay, let's say someone's always cutting corners at work, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about that one action of cutting corners. It's about how that shapes their character over time, their overall character. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Think of it like waves on the seashore,
Yeah.
Each individual wave might seem small, but over time they can reshape like the entire landscape of the shoreline. It's that consistent impact.
That's a really great analogy. I like that. It makes you realize that even those seemingly small actions that we do every day, they really do have a lasting impact. I mean, have you ever noticed that? Like how someone's like little habits, their everyday habits, those can sometimes tell you so much more about them than maybe even their like big pronouncements or their like,
Totally.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's those seemingly insignificant, everyday choices that really reveal a person's true character.
Okay. Now, here's where things get really interesting for me personally. Swami Vivekananda, he talks about this idea that all knowledge, everything we need to know, it already exists within us. It's just a matter of like uncovering it. I'm curious to hear what you think about that.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it? Think of it like like a piece of flint. A piece of flint contains fire, right? The fire's already there. It's just striking the flint just brings it out. That's what learning is like in a way.
Okay, yeah, that makes it a little easier to grasp. So it's not about like filling ourselves up with knowledge from the outside, but more about sparking something that's already like inside us that's kind of dormant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And one way to ignite that spark, according to Swami Vivekananda, is through our will. He asks us to consider these really impressive figures in history, like Buddha or Jesus, individuals who achieved incredible things. And he argues that their strength of will, it wasn't just like inborn, it was developed through this persistent work over lifetimes even.
So it's not just about talent or luck. It's more about like the effort that we put in consistently over time. That's what really shapes our will. That's kind of inspiring, actually. It makes you think about all the potential we have within us, if we're really willing to put in the work.
Yeah. And he uses this really interesting example about Buddha and his father. So you have the seemingly ordinary king, right? And then he produces this extraordinary son, Buddha. How is that possible? And the answer, according to this text, is karma. It's this karma accumulated over time, shaping Buddha's character, his will even over many, many lifetimes.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty profound. Now that actually brings up another key point in karma yoga, and that's this balance between like action and stillness. You might think that a philosophy that's focused on peace would favor being like calm and meditative all the time, right? But Swami Vivekananda, he actually seems to emphasize action quite a bit.
He does, and he makes a really striking comparison. He says too much change in either direction, whether it's, excessive activity or like complete inactivity, it can be harmful. He compares it to a deep sea fish dying when it's brought to the surface. Too much change either way is not good.
So it's about finding that like that middle ground, that sweet spot between the two.
Exactly. He describes it as intense activity amidst silence and solitude. I know that might sound like a paradox, but think about it. Like in your own life, have you ever felt that sense of like inner stillness even while you're being super productive?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like being in that flow state when you're working on something you love.
Yeah.
But how do we cultivate that more consistently? I think that's the challenge.
Well, Swami Vivekananda suggests shifting our focus, moving away from selfish action to more unselfish action. It's about moving from like a me focus to more of a we focus.
So it's not about like withdrawing from the world completely, but it's more about like engaging with the world in a less self-centered way, in a more selfless way, right?
Exactly. He uses this really great analogy about a carriage driver. He says that, controlling those horses, like guiding their energy with skill, that's a greater display of power than just letting them, run wild.
I love that analogy. It's like we're taking charge of our actions, not to control the world around us, but to become better versions of ourselves, more refined versions of ourselves.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. And to illustrate this point, he actually he tells this story about a king who kept asking every sannyasin, and for those who don't know, a sannyasin is someone who's renounced the world, all worldly possessions. So the king kept asking every sannyasin he met, who's greater, the one who renounces the world or the one who lives in the world.
Oh,
And
that's an interesting question. So is he kind of acknowledging that there are different paths in life, and it's not really about judging which one is better than the other? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, exactly. He's saying that both paths can be equally valid. And to illustrate this point, he shares this story about a princess. She was holding this elaborate ceremony to choose a husband, and in ancient India.
Wait. Before you go on, can you tell me more about this ceremony? It
Yeah.
sounds really fascinating.
Oh, it was quite an event. So the princess, she would be carried through this crowd of suitors, right, on this like ornate throne. And if she saw someone she liked, she would throw a garland of flowers over him, and boom, he would become her husband.
Wow, talk about pressure.
Yeah.
I bet those suitors were like really sweating it out, waiting for her to pass by.
Oh, you can imagine. So in this particular story, there's this handsome sannyasin, right? Someone who'd renounced all worldly possessions, and he just happened to be passing by. Well, the princess, she's instantly smitten, and she throws the garland over him. But guess what?
He didn't accept.
He didn't. He actually threw the garland back. He declared that marriage was meaningless to him. And get this, he even refused half the kingdom when the king offered it to him. He was that detached from all worldly desires.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It really shows just how deeply committed he was to his path.
Right. And the princess, she was like heartbroken, so heartbroken that she actually followed him into this dense forest. And of course the king and the storyteller in this story, they're trailing behind, trying to keep up.
Okay, so we've got this heartbroken princess, a very determined sannyasin, and a king on this like forest adventure. It sounds like a movie. But where does this whole selflessness thing come into play?
Well, so the sannyasin, he manages to escape, right? He goes through the secret path and he disappears. And the princess, she's lost and distraught. Night falls, and the king and the storyteller, they find her, and she's weeping under this large tree. And they decide to take shelter there for the night, until morning. Now, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happens next?
So a small bird family, they had built their nest in that very tree. And seeing these unexpected guests taking shelter there, the little bird turns to his wife and he says, "My dear, what shall we do? Here are guests in our house, and it is winter, and we have no fire." Oh, that's so sweet. They're worried about their guests being cold, even though they're just little birds.
I know, right? So the little bird, he flies off and he brings back this burning piece of firewood in his beak, and he drops it right in front of the guests, so they can start a fire. But then he looks at his wife again and says, "My dear, what shall we do? There is nothing to give these people to eat, and they are hungry. We are householders. It is our duty to feed anyone who comes to the house. I must do what I can. I will give them my body."
But he's gonna sacrifice himself for them.
He is. He plunges into the fire and he dies. The guests, they're horrified, obviously, and they try to stop him, but it's too late.
Oh
And
no! Oh no! Don't tell me. His wife. She does the same.
she does. She sees that one small bird isn't enough to feed three guests. And she says, "It is my duty as a wife not to let my husband's effort go in vain. Let them have my body also." And she throws herself into the fire too. Oh, this is heartbreaking. But it's such incredible selflessness. It's just wow.
And it doesn't end there. The three baby birds, they see all this happening and they say, "Our parents have done what they could, and still it is not enough. It is our duty to carry on their work. Let our bodies go too," and they all fly into the fire as well.
I'm speechless. That entire family, they sacrifice themselves for these complete strangers. It's just such a powerful image of just pure selfless giving. It really makes you think.
It does, doesn't it? So the story ends with the king and the sannyasin. They lead the princess out of the forest, and then comes the point of the whole story. The sannyasin turns to the king and says, "This is the answer to your question." The sannyasin, giving up the world, and the householder, that is, the person living a family life, each is great in their own place.
So it's not about which life is like objectively better. It's more about the spirit in which we live it. Is that what he's trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. Whether we choose to renounce the world or engage with it, the key is selflessness. It's that willingness to put the needs of others before our own. Think about your own acts of giving, you know? Are you focused on the size of the gesture or the intention behind it?
That's such a good question to ask ourselves, isn't it? It really puts things in perspective. This story is definitely going to stick with me. It's both beautiful and incredibly moving.
And that actually leads us to another really crucial aspect of karma yoga, and that's this idea of non-attachment to results.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're saying we should pour our hearts into our actions. We should, be selfless and give, but not worry about the outcome. Like how does that even work? It seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it?
I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's incredibly liberating once you start to practice it. You see, Swami Vivekananda points out that it's actually impossible to do only good or only bad, like
Hmm.
every action we take, it has this mix of consequences, even those that come from like the best of intentions.
Oh, right. Didn't he use an example to illustrate this point? I vaguely remember something about.
He did. Yeah, he said that even right now, like this conversation we're having, it could be considered good, right? Hopefully, you're gaining something from this deep dive, you're learning something new. But at the same time, like my speaking, it might be, it might be harmful to certain microbes in the air, for example. It's a fascinating way to look at it, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It kind of highlights how interconnected everything is.
Hmm.
Like we can't control every single outcome, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. And that's where this whole non-attachment thing comes in. It's about doing the work, putting in the effort, but then letting go of that need to
Hmm.
control the results.
Yeah.
It's about trusting that things will unfold as they should, even if it's not like exactly how we planned it in our minds.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's definitely easier said than done,
Right.
right? Like letting go of that need for control, it can be a real challenge. I struggle with that sometimes.
Absolutely. It's a practice, it's an ongoing process. But Swami Vivekananda's perspective on the nature of work, I think, can be really helpful here. He says that work in the context of karma yoga, it isn't about fixing the world.
Yeah.
It's more about liberating ourselves.
Oh, that's a really powerful distinction. So it's not so much about what we achieve externally, but it's about the internal transformation that happens through the process of doing the work. I'm starting to see how this non-attachment piece fits in here. Because if we're not so fixated on a specific outcome, then we can actually focus more on our own growth, on our own development.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, he uses um this really playful analogy. He talks about mice that he had as a child. Mice running on those little wheels in a cage. They're running and running, but they're not actually getting anywhere.
So are you saying we're like those mice, like putting in all this effort, but ultimately not making a real difference?
Well, he's not saying that our efforts are pointless, but maybe they're not as impactful as we might think. You
Hmm.
know, he argues that the world, it doesn't actually need our help. It'll keep spinning with or without our intervention.
Okay, yeah, I get that. But then why bother helping others at all? If it's not about, changing the world in some big measurable way, then what's the point?
Because the true benefit of helping others, according to this philosophy, it's the impact it has on us. It's
Yeah.
the moral exercise, the refinement of our own character. That's what really matters.
So by helping others, we're actually helping ourselves become better people. That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's not so much about, doing the world a favor, but about the opportunity for our own growth that serving others provides.
Right. And he tells this really humorous story to drive home this point about letting go of control. It's about this man who's completely obsessed with getting a ghost to do all his work for him.
Oh, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
who hasn't wished for like a magical assistant to handle all the chores, right?
Exactly. So this man, he finally finds a sage, and the sage agrees to help him summon a ghost, but he warns him. He says, ghosts, they're dangerous creatures. You have to keep them constantly busy. If you don't give them work to do, they'll turn on you.
Ooh, okay, that sounds a little ominous. I think you can see where this is going.
So at first, it's great. The ghost, he builds this man a palace, he brings him riches, all that good stuff. But then the man, he starts to panic because he can't think of anything else for the ghost to do.
Oh no. He's created this monster he can't control. What happens next?
The ghost, he gets impatient, he starts threatening the man, and the man, he's just desperate, so he runs back to the sage for help.
Okay, so what does the sage tell him to do? I'm dying to know.
The sage tells him to cut off a dog's curly tail and then have the ghost straighten it.
Wait, seriously, that's the solution.
It is, because of course, a dog's tail can't be straightened permanently. Every time the ghost lets go, it just curls right back up. He's stuck in this endless, impossible task.
I love that. It's such a funny image, but it makes such a good point. We can drive ourselves crazy trying to control things that are ultimately beyond our control. It's just
It,
like that ghost,
yeah.
endlessly trying to straighten that dog's tail.
Exactly. And the lesson here, it's really about, focusing on doing the work and not so much on the outcome, on the results. Like, find the satisfaction in the effort itself, not in, some imagined result in the future.
Yeah. Let go of the need for control
Yeah.
and just find joy in the journey. I think I'm starting to understand now. Didn't Swami Vivekananda also tell a story about true self-sacrifice? I feel like there was another story.
Yes, he did. It's a really moving story about this poor Brahmin family, and it takes place during a famine, so they're really struggling. They only have a tiny bit of barley flour left, just enough to share between the four of them. And just as they're about to eat, a guest
Oh
arrives.
no,
Oh.
not another guest who needs feeding. This family is already like on the brink of starvation.
Well, you have to remember that in Indian culture, hospitality is paramount. It's considered a sacred duty. So despite their desperate situation, they welcome the guest and they offer him their food.
And I'm guessing he doesn't just take a small bite to be polite, right?
No. He eats one portion and then another until the family has given him everything they had. And that night they all die of starvation.
Oh wow. That's such a heartbreaking story. They gave literally everything, even their lives, to help someone in need.
And to kind of highlight the purity of their sacrifice, a mongoose appears in the story, and it rolls on the floor where a few grains of the barley flour had fallen, and as it touches the flour, half of the mongoose's body turns to gold.
Wow, that's a really striking image.
Yeah.
It's like their sacrifice was so pure, so selfless, that it literally transformed something ordinary into something precious.
And then the mongoose says, "This is no sacrifice," implying that all the grand displays of wealth and offerings, they pale in comparison to this true, heartfelt giving of this family.
Yeah, it really makes you think about, what true selflessness means. It's not about the amount we give, it's about the spirit in which we give it. That's what really matters.
And that leads us to, I think, the highest ideal of karma yoga, and that is working without any personal motive whatsoever.
No motive. But isn't there always some reason why we do the things we do? Like even if it's subconscious, isn't there always some sort of motivation behind our actions?
It's a challenging ideal for sure. Swami Vivekananda, he points to Buddha as the embodiment of this. He argues that Buddha was really unique in teaching selflessness without relying on this concept of God or a promise of reward in the afterlife.
So it's about acting from a place of pure compassion without any expectation of recognition or payback. I can see how challenging that would be. It goes against so much of what we're taught in society.
He actually quotes Buddha as saying, "Do good and be good, and this will take you to freedom and to whatever truth there is." It's about aligning our actions with our highest values, simply because it's the right thing to do.
Wow, that's a powerful message, and really makes you examine your own motivations, doesn't it? Like why do we do the things we do? Are we acting from the right place, from the right reasons, Or are we always looking for something in return? It's a good question to ask
It
ourselves.
is. It's so easy to get caught up in the ego's desire for, recognition and reward.
Right.
But
It really is. But imagine the freedom that could come with letting go of those expectations, just acting from a place of pure intention. That's a beautiful thought.
it's challenging for sure, but also incredibly inspiring.
It makes you realize that maybe true freedom, true liberation, it actually lies in that selfless action, in aligning our actions with our highest values.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how we approach life, maybe shifting away from that what's in it for me kind of thinking.
It is. It's almost radical, isn't it? Just
Mm.
just do good and be good, no strings attached, no expectations.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple when you think about it. You mentioned earlier that you were drawn to this idea of non-attachment.
Yeah.
How do you see that connecting with this idea of selfless action?
Hmm. That's interesting. I think they really do go hand in hand when we let go of our attachment to, specific outcomes. Then we free ourselves to act from a purer place. It's no longer about what we stand to gain personally, but more about aligning ourselves with what feels right deep down,
Yeah.
what resonates with our deepest values.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the core of karma yoga, as Swami Vivekananda explains it, it's about acting with selflessness, detaching from the results of our actions,
Yeah.
and ultimately striving to work without any personal motive at all.
Yeah, you got it. And it's about recognizing that our true purpose, it's not really about, fulfilling our ego's desires, but
No.
about refining our character and serving something larger than ourselves.
It's a powerful message, and what strikes me is just how relevant it feels even today. More than a century after these lectures were given.
It's timeless, isn't it? This deep human need to find meaning and purpose. And karma yoga offers a path, a way of living that transcends any specific religion or culture.
It does.
Yeah.
It actually brings us back to that mind-bending idea we talked about earlier, that all the knowledge we need is already within us. If that's true, what's one small action we could take today to unlock a little bit more of that potential? What step could we take towards living a life that's more aligned with these principles of karma yoga?
That's the question, isn't it? What resonates with you? It could be a simple act of kindness for a stranger, letting go of a grudge you've been holding on to, or or even just taking a few minutes to sit in stillness and connect with that inner peace.
It doesn't have to be some grand gesture. It's more about those small, consistent actions,
Yeah.
done with intention, like those waves shaping the shoreline over time.
Exactly. And maybe as we become more conscious of that ripple effect of our choices, big and small, we can start to create a more positive reality, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
So much to think about, so much to explore. I hope this deep dive into karma yoga has sparked some new insights for you and inspired you to keep digging deeper.
You never know what you might discover within yourself.
Happy exploring.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.